Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I know it's been a long day, so I appreciate everybody attentiveness and engagement here. So this session is a little bit different here. We want to be a little more engaging as well. So as you can see, we're talking about measurement signals and scalable growth. And so we're going to be talking about AMC, and right, the importance of AMC. I know it's another one of those terms here, so Amazon Marketing Cloud, how important that is. So we'll talk a little bit more about AMC, showing the use cases, why it's critically important as a foundation for advertising, and then we'll have some couple partners come up and kind of speak to you about some of their experiences as well. So we have a couple partners as Chiang, the VP of Ecommerce and Sales for Braga, and we also have Eleanor Vidal-Way. Eleanor Vidal-Way. So she is our principal ad tech partnerships at Amazon. All right. As I said right there. Just beautiful picture there. Look, some great photos right there. So I just want to make sure you guys see that. So this is some great photos. I want to make sure we put a lot of time into that. I didn't even click next. So we're going to get it together. Here we go. So one of the things that we're talking about these signals here is a lot of brands are still focusing on looking at the analysis, right? But really we should be focusing on some activation systems. Now, what does that mean? So when we talk about AMC, Amazon's Marketing Cloud, there are a lot of information and signals that we can get from AMC that allows us to do certain things. But instead of just looking at this in a way that is just looking at, okay, getting insights, we have all of this data, now what do we do with it? We need to be able to take action. And we need to do this at scale. So this is really going to be the theme that we're going to try to drive today on how important that is and as a foundation of your advertising from here going forward. A couple of things, I guess, let me just ask the audience here. How many are you using AMC this year, or started using AMC this year? Okay, what about starting using it last year? Anytime before that? Okay. AMC should be the foundation of your advertising, right? It's going to be the cornerstone of getting those signals, those insights, how to understand your customer engagement through sponsored ads, programmatic DSP. It's allow you to drive efficiency throughout that customer journey. So a couple of things that we want to call out here is, for example, is customer lifetime value. We're going to speak a little bit more about this in the future, or in this presentation, but really customer lifetime value is one of these models that is kind of foundational, right? Understands how the customer is engaging through your product portfolio, what is the value of that advertising, understanding repeat purchases. There's a lot of things you can do here. This is one of those major cornerstones here as far as some of the data that you can get and signals through AMC.
Yeah, so let's jump into the kind of specific use cases. I spent 6-7 years on the agency side, and one of the biggest questions I'd always get is, hey, is our ROAS good? On this campaign, is the ROAS good? And it's, without knowing the category as a whole across Amazon, Walmart, whatever platform you're on, it is really hard to say, is that ROAS good? So we really want to look at measurement that can directionally affect how we're optimizing. Customer lifetime value is one of my favorite ones. You can look at that across all of your platforms and really see, hey, is this campaign really just driving one-time purchases, or are these customers coming back 3 months, every 6 months, multiple times in a year? I think you can also say, hey, if your customer lifetime value is low, maybe you're not investing enough in retargeting or cross-selling or getting those customers back in the door. So it can really help you understand, are you bringing those customers back into your pool quickly enough, or are you not investing enough there? Multi-touch attribution, another one. I think the last 2-3 years we've seen this big shift in the retail media space, and video is becoming bigger and more important than ever. But obviously ROAS doesn't tell the full story there. Even engagement sometimes doesn't tell the full story there. So it's really looking at weighted attribution, where every touch point in the customer journey is getting that fair value, and also looking at first touch attribution. Where is the customer journey starting? Did they see that STV ad first? Did they see that OLV ad first? How are they getting to the sponsored product? Because it's typically not the sponsored product that's starting off that journey.
Yes, I know we may be preaching to the choir here, but this is just fundamentally kind of set the framework on kind of what we're doing, on how important this is. Now, new to brand, for example, is another model, and that's just kind of summarize some of these things that some of our client partners and brands and agencies are just using for analysis. Again, the next step is here: how do you activate on this information? How do you activate on these signals and insights in a scalable way? one of the things here is new brand. This is another model that you can use for AMC as well. New to brand really is going to help you understand if you're bringing new customers, right? There's some really cool things you can do here for new to brand. You can look at ad attributed new to brand. You can look at organic new to brand, for example. And there's some really cool things that we'll talk about as far as kind of incremental growth in the future here in just a couple seconds, I should say, that allows you to really try to grow and target those customers that would help you build a little bit more engagement, for example. Now, new to brand can be done in a couple ways. We're looking at not only for campaigns, and ASINs, again, it's all through the insights and signals and information that you get to AMC. But this is just one of those core models that allows you to start to get some of these insights and start to activate in a way that makes sense. What's really critical about this is that when we're talking about full funnel measurement, we're talking about these different advertising types and ad products that you can leverage, whether it be through search or programmatic. But there's different ways you can approach it based on what part of the funnel that you're targeting, right? So it can be brand and loyalty, consideration stage, lower awareness, upper awareness funnel. There's different things that you can use and different models that you can use in order to get these insights. But how do you make sense of it and activate them? And you do these through audiences as well. So as you link these insights, now we can activate these audiences through search and DSP, and that's becoming so fundamental that we're leveraging these audiences not only with DSP, but search as well. So that's been critically important here. So let's talk about when you should do shifts here. And it's not necessarily about when you should shift. It's really about asking the business question, why am I using the AMC? What am I going to get here? Like, what am I going to do with this information? That's been the critical problem. And we know that one of the things here is that technology is changing so fast. Information is coming to us very quickly, and we need to react very quickly as well. And so, ability to do some scale is really going to help you understand, build that brand, and understand these signals that you're trying to get here. So it's not necessarily about should I be shifting spend to sponsored ads or DSP. This is a business question that you want to ask yourself, and there are other business questions that you can ask as well. Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's really asking, when you're going into that AMC model or that clean room on another platform, it's really asking at the end of the day, what's your goal? Are you launching a new product? That goal is going to look a little bit different than, trying to kind of increase that top line churn on a different product. So it's really kind of diving deeper and asking, not is my ROAS good, is my ROAS bad, but really kind of asking the deeper level questions. How many times are we reaching this shopper before they're making that purchase? How long is that purchase journey? Before we don't even retarget them before and they've probably purchased another product. So it's really getting to that kind of deeper level. What are we trying to uncover here with these metrics as you're going into it versus just kind of reacting to the metrics going on and really using those signals to kind of direct your strategy as you go into the next month and the next quarter.
We're going to talk about a lot of metrics for ROAS. It's going to be one of them, don't worry. But there's other metrics that we should be paying attention to as well. And with AMC, these are the signals that you can get. So look at the frequency of purchase. When does the customer come back and re-engage with your advertising or with your brands or products, for example? Are they spending enough time on your brand store that you put a lot of time into in order to convert that customer as well, to educate that consumer? Are they clicking on this online video in the middle of search and getting to that detail page? Are they adding to cart, for example? AMC allows you to get a lot of these metrics and understand and evaluate how you should approach. So we have the insight of what exactly we do with that. We are going to talk about how some of our client partners and brands are leveraging this in an advanced way. And so the signals are there, the information is there, but we need to understand how to systematically approach to achieve the objective that we want. And the objective all starts with the question, and that's key here. Now,
I was just going to say a couple other ones. I mean, if you're spending more, are you actually reaching more unique customers? Is one of the ones that I love to look at with our unique reach report and really kind of seeing, are we just adding another audience that we're already kind of targeting across our other campaigns, or are we actually getting incremental reach with new users as that budget is going up? What's that path look like, and how can we optimize that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you start to scale, one of the challenges that we've been faced with is, are we reaching the right customer at the right time, and are we overlapping on that media investment, right? So incrementality, that's the word, the buzzword here. There's some really cool things that you can do with some of the insights and signals and the data that is being brought to us through these APIs with AMC that allows us to not only target new-to-brand additive shoppers. We can engage organic new-to-brand as well. We can also engage non-exposed shoppers, and I think that this is going to be really important. We'll talk about a use case for that. But basically looking at shoppers that have been non-exposed to your ads in a certain amount of time. So as we use that in combination with unique reach, then we can truly understand for that particular part of the funnel, are we really making the media investment in the right place, right? And how much of that media investment do we need to make in order to get the result that we're looking for? And that's something like I mentioned before, multi-touch attribution comes into play. Are we over or under invested in our media strategy based on the goal that we're trying to set? And it all starts with that business question. So if new brand or growth in sales, for example, or cost per detail, page view, click-through, whatever it is engagement metrics that we have, what is it that we're trying to evaluate and what is the result that we're trying to get? And this allows, AMC allows you to get that information and get those signals in order to do something with it as well. Yeah. So next here, one of the things is, one of the challenges that we've realized is that it's a mindset shift. When we speak to some of our HB partners and brands, they're really starting to pick this up, of course, right? There's some late bloomers to it. There are people who are extremely advanced that we talk to. But the biggest thing is that we understand the value of AMC and how to approach this. There may be some challenges as things start to change around based on what we do with that information, but this is where the educational piece comes in and tools that help me get these insights in a scalable way and a repeatable way. And from there, it's really how do you shift the mindset of, let's say, the brand or leadership and report out in a way that makes sense. Again, talking about ROAS, if we can agree on the ROAS. Now, we're not saying that ROAS is not important, right? It is important. How much money are we getting back for the dollar that we're spending on media investment? But maybe there's a different way that we can look at this. And so as we start talking about some of this mindset shift, there's some things some pitfalls that typically we've seen that speaking to some of our client partners and other brands who are interested in AMCs don't know exactly what to do with it.
Yeah, well, it's really making sure all your data is connected. I know I've been, having been on the agency side, been on some teams where, kind of your upper funnel investment is managed by one team, and then, you have your sponsored products and lower funnel managed by another team, and, upper funnel, they're looking at engagement, click-through, to kind of determine campaign success, and then lower funnel, you're really looking at ROAS and purchase rate and all of that, but you're not getting those consumer journeys connected. And again, it's really if that consumer's starting, upper funnel and then moving down, you really want to make sure all that data is in one place. And ROAS, last touch attribution, isn't going to tell you that story. And so that's really where some of these metrics come into play. Customer lifetime value is going to show you all those purchases that happen over the course of the year. And so you're going to see that data unified in one place. Multi-touch attribution, you're going to get that credit across all of those different touch points. So it's not going to be, it really kind of brings the teams together just in terms of being able to see how that investment's playing out. Because it used to be siloed into kind of 3 different buckets, so it's really bringing that clean room in to connect all the different dots across, and really kind of shifting your mindset to that way of looking at the metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So when we talk about that shifting mindset, there has been some pitfalls that we recognize, right? And some patterns there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, really the biggest thing, kind of going out on the last slide is, looking at one campaign or one part of your portfolio by itself, you're not going to get the full story there. You're not going to see the other clicks that led up to that purchase. So you really want to make sure, you're looking at your investment across the board and across different channels, and where that's leading consumers, whether that's in-store, online, the different touch points. Also, over-optimizing for last click. Again, that's going to lead you to shifting too much of your ad into one type of ad product. So again, really looking at different attribution types and how that kind of impacts what your budget should be going into the next quarter as well. And the ROAS, we've already mentioned that a few times, so we won't dive too deep into that. I think it's also kind of looking from a creative standpoint where you're at and how that's affecting your funnel as well. With AMC, you can kind of break out those campaigns into different kind of segments, so you can even break upper funnel even further out into streaming TV, certain inventory types, and really dig deep into kind of that purchase path to see kind of how different creatives are affecting that as well. And then again, if teams are working off different KPIs and you're never bringing those KPIs together with a clean room, again, you're just optimizing towards totally different purchase paths. And that's going to lead to fragmented results over the long term instead of top line growth.
You know, Braga, I want to, Johnathon, but Braga, I want to kind of double click into this. No pun intended for the last look efficiency here. But one of the things when we're talking about attribution is really cool with our multi-type attribution, for example, that you can do. You can get down to a campaign level to understand where in your the funnel that you're trying to target in a strategy. So for new to brand purchases, is it sales, for example? Is it total purchases? There's many different metrics that you can optimize for, which is critical here. We know that Amazon, for example, is last touch, for example, right? But one of the things you can do with some of these insights as you build these queries or have tools that can do them for you is that you can change whether or not you want to look at a click or impression for a particular attribution. So for example, if we're talking about a lower awareness funnel play, we're looking at online video, for example, or brand video for another example. So search is still click-based even though it's a video, but maybe we don't want to look at the click to get to the detail page. Maybe surfacing that particular video within the middle of search is important enough. How do we look at that? We analyze that by looking at path to conversion to understand if there was an impression on that particular search, for example. A multi-touch attribution, for example, instead of getting a click, we can actually look at this from an impression view, so we can understand if there's engagement that we're looking at, not just a click, but just an impression, or that viewing this from an awareness play, so we can see if we need to invest more in that or pull back, versus just looking at this for a click, which could lead you down the wrong direction. But now let's look at this on the other hand. If you have DSP and we're looking at lower funnel tactics, so we're targeting Amazon owned and operated, for example, or we're looking at brand loyal customers who've already been engaged with the brand in this lower funnel tactic. Maybe for DSP, we don't want to look at an impression. We want to drive customer traffic to that detail page. So we can actually look at this from a click standpoint versus an impression standpoint. So now, if you were looking at this from an impression standpoint, looking at the click to drive to detail page, you may think that, oh, we're trying to drive sales with DSP. The model will tell you something different. It leads you down the wrong direction because we're not talking about getting the customer to the page and leaving, whatever case. We want them to purchase. And this is a lower funnel tactic, so we're retargeting a customer who may have been brand loyal or may need to repurchase a particular product for your product portfolio, for example. So looking at DSP from a click standpoint, and then understanding if you're over and under invested could really help you optimize for the lower funnel tactic. And upper funnel tactic is just a little bit different, right? Maybe for search, that's part of the play. Maybe we're doing branded search, or we have non-branded search terms that we're bidding on, for example. But we don't necessarily want to look at the click. Maybe there's something like an impression, for example, for DSP. And then we want to see if you're engaging with something else through online video. Not online video, but like sponsored brands, for example, or even sponsored display. So that flexibility you have with AMC in those models, right? To help you understand for that particular goal, whether it be an awareness play or lower funnel play to help customer repurchase, are we looking at the right signal and the right metric in order to engage this customer at the right time and in the right way? Does that make sense? I know that was a lot. That's a mouthful right there, right? Okay. But multi-touch attribution, I think helps you really kind of understand where you are over and under investing. I think that's really cool here. But there's a couple others here. And so unique reach is also important as well. We have talked about that in incremental growth, right? One of the things here that's a little bit more advanced is also ASI, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Let me specify with ASI. So Amazon Insights has two different pieces of information included with it. It's going to be ASI, which is Audience Segment Insights, and also FSI, Flexible Shopping Insights. Who knows what both of those are? Raise your hand. Okay, we got a couple. Okay, so Flexible Shopping Insights is your new to brand organic information, right? So think consumables, a lot of repeat purchases, beauty products, etc. That's going to be critically important for you to get that information in. ASI is Audience Segment Insights. So this allows you to understand what audiences that Amazon has available to you that are identified by that customer to really identify if they're in market, a particular demographic, etc. And so now we really have a full picture of the shoppers on Amazon, and we can do some really cool things with that information for a model through AMC as well, so we can talk about that. So I spoke a little bit about this, but we're going to spend a little bit of time here because we want to understand like how sophisticated brands kind of measure differently, right? And so we talked about these signals, these metrics, for example. So I'm going to give a couple examples here. Then we have some use cases that we can go through to kind of help you and drive home on that a little bit more. So I'll start with something, let's go with path to conversion, right? Again, this is every ad product that a customer touched that led to a conversion, right? It's simple on the surface. But we can get some really cool things out of this as well. So for example, let's say that you wanted to look at your branding strategy versus a non-branded keyword strategy, right? And so let's say you've broken out something by a single keyword campaign, for example. So this is one of those non-branded campaigns. You have some pretty high click-through. You have some organic share there because you've invested in this keyword, and you rank pretty high in that search results pages, for example. But is it critically important to driving you the brand, right? We already knew that, hey, if you want to go up the rank, you want to get more organic clicks and more organic traffic, this is the way to drive the brand through non-branded search terms. And you can do that. So with some of the queries, what you can do is you can set that as a particular engagement piece. And so you can look at these single keyword campaigns in combination with other your ad products in that strategy. So this is kind of the lower funnel consideration or high intent strategy and see whether or not that non-branded search term was critical to that particular sale. You can also do that for branding as well. Like would a customer have purchased from our brand if they haven't searched for our branded search term? So you can do really cool things like that with tap to purchase. And then of course you can talk about online video, streaming TV, for example. That's an engagement piece, an engagement point. So tell me a little bit more about that. I know you've had some experience with some brands.
Yeah. I mean, I know testing's been talked about a few different times today. And I think that's where a lot of this really comes into play. You know, first 30, 60, 90 days of really kind of starting to increase upper funnel investment. It's kind of hard sometimes to prove out again with those standard metrics. Is this actually working? So that's where I found a lot of value in some of these AMC insights is you're able to see kind of that proof of purchase or that proof of conversion a lot sooner than you would be able to just through standard KPIs. So yeah, I mean, I've done, I've worked with a few different clients in the past where we've started with OLB, maybe a 5 to 10% investment, and looking at path to purchase, we were able to see, when looking at the sales from those OLB campaigns relatively low to everything else we were running in the mix. But when we looked at path to purchase, that's really where we started to see the impacts. With 3 of those, the top 5 purchase paths, starting with OLB as the touch point. Now they finish at sponsored products or they finish at sponsored brand ads or a retargeting campaign, but that first touch point was OLB, and that let us more dollars to kind of continue that investment and to continue scaling that out. So I would say especially in those early stages where you're testing a new strategy and you're not sure if it's going to work or not, these are the touch points you need to be looking at and evaluating to justify that investment, and that's going to lead to more, more spend and more scale, and you're going to get more confident in that tactic as you go into an event like Prime Day or something bigger where there's a lot more on the line.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to drive home is not just one model that you're going to use, right? You're going to use a plethora of insights in order to kind of get to that strategic decision. I'll give you another example that I really enjoy as well. Cross-product association helps you understand through your product portfolio how customers are engaging with them. Are they buying one product? Are they coming in with a hero product? Buying another? Buying things in combination like ARPU, average revenue per user, for example? Or are they looking at a product, not purchasing, and coming back and doing something else? Are they purchasing a product for subscribing sake? These are all signals through that engagement from the customer that you can get through AMC. So take this one example. This is a supplement brand. With this supplement brand, they had 2 hero products. And one of their hero products they need to continue to invest in because they thought that was a primary one. And for many years it was. And then there's a secondary product, which is another one that customers are introduced to, right? But what they realized over time that they started to notice that their top selling product wasn't producing enough revenue. It started to decline. So they wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So they got access to AMC in order to kind of get some information. And this is kind of really cool here. So what they realized that there were some other problems with their detail page and how to convert that customer. There were some things they needed to do there, but they also found something else. For the customer that came in their primary products, let's say their number 1 product, they realized that with the customer lifetime value model that they necessarily weren't coming back. The lifetime ROAS, bringing that back up again, the lifetime ROAS and the revenue driven from those unique visitors over time was less with their number 1 product than their secondary product. And the secondary product started to drive more repeat purchases and quantity of repeat purchases. So it was sooner and also more frequent. And so you need to understand why that was happening. And so as they started to dig a little bit deeper, they realized that the customer experience with their primary supplement product wasn't as good. That they purchased a different flavor that they didn't enjoy, the size was too much. There were a couple other things. And I think that there was a couple of other ones they had a problem with their lot. But they realized that, hey, customers are more frequently having a bad experience or not a favorable experience, and they're not coming back to our brand. And so when they started to look at the investment with the secondary product, they realized although they weren't getting as much revenue from those users up front, they realized that customers are coming back more often and then also purchasing more. And so that's how they shifted their investment from understanding what was their main problems with their primary product to a secondary product that allowed customers to kind of test different flavors, different form factors of that particular supplement, and then have a better experience and come back more. But they also realized there was something going on with their diesel base where they weren't as retail ready as they needed to be as time passed on. There were different competitors, and so they were able to get a lift there once they started to evaluate it a little bit more, but that was all driven through insights with AMC.
Yeah. And then kind of you touched on cross-product association briefly there, but I had an instance where I was working with a brand that was, they were about 15 different kind of household and kitchen categories, and we were really kind of looking, how can we bring these customers back a little bit faster? Where's those cross-sell opportunities? And using cross-product association, we uncovered coffee makers and toddler products had a high affinity. When they purchased one, they were very likely to kind of purchase the other one. And out of all their products, I mean, it seemed like a very unlikely combo, but we were able to test that and start kind of putting our cross-selling products with those creatives, and really started to see kind of the large lift from that. So it's just, sometimes you uncover these kind of trends, or correlations that you normally want to be able to kind of see in the app console with these different kind of next level insights.
Yeah, thank you, Braga. And lastly, one thing I mentioned ASI, right? So Amazon Insights as well. This is really cool. I think this is one of our most powerful models that we use, and we've had some clients and partners have some great success with this. So what is it, right? And so this gives you the ability to actually look at non-exposed advertisers. What's really cool about this is that, of course, you're going to look at attributed sales, you're going to look at non-attributed new brand as well. But now we can look at users or shoppers that have not been exposed over a certain amount of time. So if you look at some of the audiences that are associated with it, we're doing a little bit different way with this model, right? So with this one, we're able to not only just, first off, we're able to identify some like the high infinity and high maybe converting, whatever value you want to look at, measure that you want to look at, audiences for your brand, right? So based on current purchasers, what demographics and what in-market segments, et cetera, I guess are identified with them as a high affinity, high value shopper. And then from there, we're able to say, instead of targeting just audiences where we have to test and learn and then find the users or shoppers that kind of make sense, now we flip it on its head where now we understand the audiences that have a high propensity to convert for your brand. Instead of going out and looking at all successful earning, we can find the users who are associated with these audience segments. And I'll talk about, have a case study here, a use case that allows us to kind of identify what that actually meant, right? And that helps you really extract users who have already been exposed, right? So now we're looking at shoppers that have previously not been exposed to your brand with a certain amount of time, have made a purchase, haven't viewed the detail page, for example, but based on the information that I already have, they have most likely have a high affinity or potentially a high value shopper for your brand. And that's going to drive efficiency all the way to your purchase pattern and also lead into more incremental growth for your brand as well. So here are a couple of use cases that we want to talk about before we bring up some of our other partners as well. So, Braga.
Yeah. So we kind of briefly touched on this a couple slides back, but again, really kind of looking at path to purchase to justify some of those specific ad types. Again, especially when you're just kind of starting out with some of those campaigns, you're not going to see, that attribution, and you're not going to see the same sales numbers that you're seeing across DSPs. So it's really kind of breaking it out. We looked at a couple different models for this specific instance when we were kind of trying to justify our OLV tests. Again, we're going after a product that was a little bit more expensive than everything else in the catalog. And so that's where we really thought, video would be a better use of those funds, so we could show off kind of some of the key differentiators of the product. And again, early on, the first month of the test, the numbers weren't there to justify it, but when we started to look at path to purchase, we saw that's where a lot of these customers were coming into the funnel, and then they weren't just staying there, they were actually moving down into other parts of the funnel. And so that's kind of the key piece there, is seeing what percentage of that audience is actually moving down to the next funnel, to see if that audience is worth continuing that investment in. And then also unique reach. Utilizing some of these other ad types like OLV, we were able to see that was actually just increasing PPC spend because they were a category leader, wasn't leading to new unique reach. Where when we added video and some of the new inventory that comes with that, that's where we really started to see the actual number of unique visitors coming to our product detail pages, and shoppers we were reaching was starting to scale up, and that led us to invest more into it, and led to a strong Prime Day, due to that kind of test pre-Prime Day and that investment increase leading up to it.
So thank you. Here's one use case that I want to talk about here, and this is bringing it back home with the Amazon Insights ad mentioned, right? So looking at users that have been non-ad exposed. So Ugreen, this is actually one of the awards. This is published by Amazon as well. So Ugreen, consumer electronic company in APAC, and we wanted to. They had a co-branding opportunity, right? And so they wanted to go after gamers, for example. And so they knew they were leading in the space with consumer electronics, but how can they build a story that's going to be relevant for gamers, even though that's still part of the consumer base that they were trying to engage, for example. So with ASI information, right, so looking at audience and segment insights, flexible shopping insights, and of course using AMC, DSP, and these custom audience creations, what we wanted to do is, with this co-branding opportunity, how do we find the right users and engage them in the right way without doing a lot of test learning? How do we make this more impactful with less churn? And we're able to do that by leveraging some of the non-exposed information. So we have a great understanding of the shoppers that were already engaged and have purchased from this brand before. So we had a good idea of some of these stronger categories or stronger audience segments that are relevant as a high propensity segment for this brand. From there, you want to understand, okay, well now we have this brand story, so we're talking about gaming. What platforms are we going to be on, right? So if we look at DSP, now we have the opportunity to go to Twitch, for example. So we had Twitch, we have some other streaming TV ads, we have sponsored ads, of course, for the lower funnel. We need to re-engage them in the right way if they come and shop. This is why we do it, right? High intent. And so we're looking at upper funnel awareness, we're driving them down the funnel to consideration, and we're hoping to get them to engage and make a purchase decision with this co-branded opportunity. So now, instead of, again, just targeting only these audiences, we went out with the information through ASI, which is a very powerful tool with AMC, and we're able to look at these shoppers, potential shoppers that already had the audiences aligned to them that had a high propensity to purchase from our brand, because we had that information from ASI's non-exposed shopper data. So now we had a great way to go and target. Now we just have to build that story, and that's exactly what we did. And what were the results of that? So we can see here, maybe it's a little bit lower here, but pretty much we beat on most of the benchmarks that we needed to for that category. We had higher click-through of 0.24%, and this would be across all impressions and all advertising that they did, for example. We had 4.6% for detail page views, so again, above benchmarks, allowing us to give more users to that detail page to make a purchase decision. And out of those purchases, 85% of them were co-branded, meaning that we haven't purchased from them before through that co-branded opportunity. And we're able to execute on that very effectively because of all the insights that we've had, right? And so that's where ASI, looking at not only your ad attributed organic through the brand, but also the non-exposed shopper information is huge when you're talking about like results like this. Okay, so next up, just gonna go through and get this here. So yeah, right, future retail.
Yeah, so I think, again, as we kind of look to the future and what to expect, I think a big piece, a lot of the metrics we know, like Amazon Marketing Cloud and whatnot, we're starting to see in other platforms. So I think we'll continue to see clean rooms really expand and become a bigger part of the retail media ecosystem as a whole. Incrementality, again, another piece. We provided a few examples here today of how we, kind of utilize incrementality just in terms of kind of looking at, new to brand reach, customer lifetime value. But I think we'll continue to see the different retail media platforms come out with their own forms of incrementality to kind of drive and push that, brand growth across the board. Measurement and governance, which we're going to talk about a little bit in our next session here. We'll have a little bit more on, but really understanding and kind of standardizing measurement across kind of the ecosystem. We know when we're looking at ROAS, on one platform versus another, those ROAS is how they're measured, the backlog that goes into that aren't always identical, so it's very hard, right now to measure kind of omni-channel performance across the board. So I think we're going to continue to see a shift to more of a standardized approach there across the board. And then really, I think it's, diving into your catalog at the ASIN level, understanding, what's profitable, what's driving those metrics at an ASIN level, at a category level, and not just kind of at your catalog level as a whole.
And what should leaders do next, right? And the first thing is really to start with the business question, like what are you trying to solve? What question are you trying to answer for the business? This is going to help you understand what models and insights that you're trying to glean information from in order for you to activate on it. That's going to be used. Prioritize a small number of high impact measurements, right? So you don't have to just throw everything in there and do all at once, right? So test and learn a little bit, right? Understand a little bit what the information is telling you, how you activate that, and then start building processes and scalable solutions across that, right? So once you figure it out and get deeper, you start to understand the insights a little bit more, and the combination of insights that you may have, different models that they may use, and this will allow you to really kind of do this to scale at speed, especially if you have a tool provider that helps you do this with these. And then again, it's just understanding that measurement of earnings, right? So really just understand what these models are trying to help you solve, like customer lifetime value. We can look at customer acquisition costs, repeat purchases, how many people are repeat purchasing, the frequency of purchases, right? That decision timeline from the first engagement of the ad, for example. When you need to engage that customer again, loyalty. How do you strip away the customers that haven't been primed from your brand and then only be able to engage customers who have a high propensity to purchase from you as an effective way? These insights and signals with AMC and audience creation allows you to build efficiencies all the way through the customer journey. Adding to cart, adding to wish list, abandoned cart, high affinity with ASI. These are just a handful of different signals that you can use in order to start to activate on. All right. So, next up, I'm going to have Chiang from Better Being Coach.
So you guys can stay here. We're almost yeah. We'll try to make this fast and get through everything. So, a little bit of background about me. I started in the e-commerce space in the early 2010s. Moved from Amazon to the agency side, now to the brand side finally. And last 3 years I've been working and had the pleasure of kind of building out the e-commerce team from really single-digit number sales to over 1/3 of our business. And as our conversation goes today, there's so many metrics out there that we've been throwing around. And I think the biggest takeaway that I really want to impress on everybody here is simplifying things like inputs and outputs. I think that's the biggest thing that I have the ability to do and try to really express to my team on how to optimize your time about thinking of the total business. So when you look at our total challenges that we're going through on a day-to-day basis, it really comes down to, is it a traffic or is it a conversion problem? Because either way it ends up in a sale or it doesn't end up in a sale. So really, there's so many metrics that are out there that we have a wealth of information to access to. We have to prioritize and really distill it down to, is it an input, is it an output? And I guarantee you sometimes it's both input and output. You just have to classify it into what you need to see. So as you look at your business, your unique business case, it may be easy to fall into a trap of looking at a playbook that you want to implement. I guarantee you that this is how you always end in a situation where things may not fall into what you might need. So I think as you look into your own unique situation, understanding what specific metrics are inputs, what specific metrics are outputs, are going to be what will drive the best result for you at the end. So in my specific scenario here, right, we are trying to look at how to, one of the things that I've been blessed with in my current role is, we've been given a lot of incremental money to spend. And Xnurta loves that, Amazon loves that. So you have to look at, okay, how can we scale it efficiently? And how do we measure what is success? And so, going to the question of how we're doing things, well, ultimately, when you're trying to pitch a $1 million, $2 million, $3 million incremental spend, the board's going to ask you back, well, what is my return from that, right? So, again, you have to look at what your toolkit of metrics that you need to pull out to convince people to give you money at the end of the day. So, here are the signals that we look at. Typically, we have our overall advertising metrics, which, again, these are things you've heard all day, so I'm not going to repeat them. Customer acquisition metrics, again, so you have traffic, advertising, conversion, acquisition equals sales. So I think as you go to the end of the day, one takeaway that I think has been Amazon for the past, call it 2-3 years, it really has become a share of voice game. So you have to look at what you're doing and how it addresses the total addressable market for Amazon. And what you're doing has to affect your share of voice on the platform. So I will share with you our numbers from one of our brands. And I think the key thing I want you guys to take away here is that there's so many different types of advertisements. At the end of the day, your marketing funnel is your marketing funnel, right? So, whether if you're the sponsored products, DSP, it all comes down to awareness, consideration, and conversion. So you have to bucket your spend accordingly and making sure that you are filling each part of the funnel. So when we had limited funding and really the beginning of our fiscal year, I deployed on my knees and begged for money, and that happened in March. So as you can see, I think one of the things I want to prove out was the fact that you can efficiently spend an incremental 100% on Amazon and brand. So I think that, again, taking all the tools that you've seen today from, the variety of partnership between Amazon, Walmart, and Xnurta, I think you should be able to tease out, what outputs you're expecting based on what you're inputting into your business on a day-to-day basis. And I'll introduce Elma.
Hi everyone, my name is Eleanor Ndalway. I am the ATIC AE working with Xnurta, and as an ATIC AE, in case you haven't worked with one, what we do is we work with brands, agencies, different enterprise partners to really develop your ATIC partnership, looking at Amazon Marketing Cloud, looking at your DSP integrations, and now, as Liz mentioned, MCP server and integrating with that. So, all right. You heard David and Johnathon talk about AMC, and he talked about the business impact that AMC Insights has brought into his campaign. And what I want to share with you guys is one of the biggest challenges that I hear from the marketers and brands that I work with is how can I fully maximize the use of my first-party data and at the same time tap into all the rich retail purchase, browsing, streaming signals, device signals that Amazon has, and I have it at my fingertips. And this is one of the biggest and most powerful use cases that AMC can help unlock for you today, because within Amazon Marketing Cloud, imagine unifying your first-party data Amazon's ad signals, the trillions of signals that we have, we're even incorporating publisher signals in H2, looking at signals from DirecTV or NBC Universal. And so imagine combining all those signals into a single analytics platform and being able to unlock deeper insights, richer insights about your campaigns, about your customers, and then taking that a step further, being able to action on it. So turning those insights into audiences that you can then activate on DSP or your sponsored ads campaigns to help, better optimize and drive better outcomes for the brands that you work with. And so one example of that really is a use case that we had with Xnurta. And I will say Xnurta has a really fantastic data science team, but they wanted more flexible options in creating audiences, creating models in AMC. They wanted to be able to use the advertisers' first-party signals, and they wanted to combine that with Amazon signals in order to have a more customized, purpose-built audience that they could use for their advertisers. And at this time, they were working with advertiser Waterdrop. And with Waterdrop, one of the challenges that they were facing was that from a full funnel perspective, they were seeing strong performance within their core categories. However, like many brands, they felt that they were, maybe reaching a plateau. They weren't seeing any more incremental lift, incremental audiences or customers for their campaigns. And so how Xnurta solved this is they leveraged Amazon Marketing Cloud's custom models solution. So with custom models, you can actually take an advertiser's first-party signals, for example, your ad engagement or your ad interaction patterns or your search behaviors or any other first-party data that you have. You can combine this with Amazon's trillions of signals and then design and customize an audience that is really tailor-made for the business question that you have. And what they did was they took all of Waterdrop's first-party signals. They used, as David mentioned, Amazon's audience segment insights. And by combining this with the first-party signals and Amazon's audience signals, they created an audience segment that they were then able to run on the DSP. And the results were really strong from a full funnel perspective. So what they saw is that from an upper funnel perspective, the audience that they were able to target with this new custom model actually had a higher engagement, and they saw this with a higher detailed page view for the upper funnel campaign. And this translated all throughout the funnel with stronger sales, as well as a higher transaction value for the campaigns that they were running. So not only did they see, accelerated, more engaged visits to their detailed page view, but they also saw a more qualified audience, an audience that was more likely to convert, more likely to engage, and more likely to drive that, sales for them. And then beyond what they saw with the upper funnel and the lower funnel results, they were also looking at incrementality because everyone wants to see how scalable this is. And what they saw is for the audience that they created, that they designed, there was actually minimal overlap with their control group. And so this was an audience that not only was efficient, but also was scalable and able to drive incremental reach for their campaigns. And so this is a great example of how marketers, brands, agencies today can use AMC to unlock more value for the brands that you work with. You can, break through performance plateaus. You can leverage AMC for deeper, richer insights to drive better outcomes for your brands and your campaigns. And this isn't just a one-off success story. This is something that a lot of my brands, a lot of my agencies have, repeatedly used and used as a framework so that they can use it for not just, a single brand, but many of the brands that they work with today. So hopefully you guys will see a lot of value in AMC. If you have any questions, we're happy to take questions right now, and we're also available during happy hour.
Thank you. All right, we have any questions in the audience here?
Right. Definitely seeing some good questions coming from the audience. First up, I wanted to thank everybody, David, Jonathan, Yi, and Eleanor for the insightful session. Sometimes it feels like more data, more problems. Fragmented signals create fragmented decisions, and with fragmented decisions, really you're getting budgets that are being allocated to what's easiest to measure, not necessarily what drives really growth. So what we covered today, the framework that was shared, it's great that it's something we can reference as we're planning for measurement cycles. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go through some of the questions from the audience. We have about 10 minutes. Yeah, that's a good amount of time. So I see the live feed. So first one, I definitely see some themes going on. Let's start with ROAS, and I'm going to direct that over to Yi. The first question is, how do you know when you're at a place as a brand to move beyond that idea of ROAS and focus on these KPIs that were mentioned earlier, like long-term lifetime value?
Yeah, I think ROAS traditionally for me has always been an efficiency metric. It really hasn't been a result that I'm trying to achieve. So again, I think a lot of conversations today have really catered around, okay, how do we elevate our ability to look at what is success? So again, that goes back into, your performance of your current campaigns really is the output of your ROAS. So I think if you can hold a ROAS of a certain amount, and if you're comfortable with it, honestly, you can always decide to move up or down. I think there's certain benchmarks that you should be aware of. I think that's the most important thing is, each individual types of campaigns have a typical associated efficiency metric with them. So as long as you keep those within bounds, you should be able to successfully scale at any rate.
Yeah, I want to add to that, your response there. So for example, one of the more trivial ones, and this is kind of back in the day, even now so much so, we understand that organic ranking is significantly important to your success on Amazon, driving efficiency, getting organic traffic, etc. For the millions of customers that are coming to Amazon with their wallets out for them. So your metric may not be ROAS if you're trying to build organic ranking for a keyword relevancy, for example. It's going to look very different from a branded campaign. So what is your strategy? A non-branded campaign where you're trying to build organic ranking, or is it a branded campaign where you should have a lot of brand presence and brand recognition, for example? Or are we talking about awareness, where we're talking about online video or DSP, right?
Exactly.
Those metrics are going to look completely different based on what you're trying to achieve. Because maybe it's not ROAS, maybe it's cost per retail page view.
Exactly.
Or CPMs, for example.
I think that one of the most underutilized tools on Amazon really is SQP and shared voice. So you have to really look at what you're doing. Does it affect the output? And if we're really looking at shared voice, SQP as a measurement of success, then you have to look at the inputs of that, right? So are you spending on single ASIN campaigns? Are you spending on programmatic? Are you spending on things? All those contribute into your end result.
And additionally, this is signals like SQP, so you search for performance that people, you say, like, how are you benchmarking against your competitors, right? If you see yourselves down, like what is happening? Has there been a new entrant? Are you using click share? Which could be a signal that you're losing organic ranking. There's so much information that are tied up into this to what activation that you need, but you need to understand what the problem is. And ROAS may not be the end-all, be-all metric when it comes to some of those challenges.
Yeah, I think that's that's the core problem of the industry that we're in. There's a wealth of metrics out there, and we just get stuck in our foot sometimes.
But I don't think you have to give up necessarily ROAS to look at these other metrics. You can still go in if you have, two similar campaigns with similar customer lifetime value. Maybe you are looking at ROAS as that tiebreaker. So it's not like you're giving up ROAS to look at these other metrics, but it's more about layering on multiple metrics and kind of figuring out your strategy and where you're going to go from there based on those multiple layers. Because 2 or 3 data points together is going to tell you more of the story and why something's happening versus just looking at that ROAS by itself.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's just a matter of determining the success metrics before we do a lot of these tests. I know everything defaults back to ROAS somehow, but yeah, I absolutely get it. Piggybacking off of that, but moving up the funnel, we have a question around awareness. So for awareness tactics like streaming TV, how do you protect investment and trust for results that look bad? I might direct this over to Eleanor.
That's a great question, and I get that a lot from the brands that we work with, because when they look at their streaming TV investment and then they look at maybe their search investment or their display investment, they say, why isn't streaming TV generating the same ROAS as my lower funnel campaigns? And what I'll say to that is that's not a media failure, but that is a measurement gap. So what you need to do is, even before you run your campaigns, you need to set the measurement framework for your full funnel campaign. You need to say that, okay, from a streaming TV perspective, I'm looking at awareness, I'm looking at consideration, and then as I move down to the funnel, that's when ROAS and other metrics come to play. And you need to look at things holistically. And a great way to do that is when you use Amazon Marketing Cloud. You see the path to conversion analysis, and you'll see that for customers, and this is what I've seen actually in case studies, where customers who visit or who are exposed to their streaming TV campaign, as well as lower funnel tactics, have a higher purchase rate versus those who are exposed to a single tactic alone. And so in order to protect that, streaming TV investment, you should make sure you invest in a measurement framework that makes sense, leveraging tools like AMC, multi-touch attribution, looking at the whole customer journey, and looking at things holistically in order to see that what you're doing actually works.
I really appreciate that. One thing I want to add to that, I don't know, for advanced, you mentioned path to conversion, right? And so, there are ways for you to break out this particular engagement as well. So if you want to understand if streaming TV is a starting point for that customer journey or somewhere in the middle where you re-engage them and they ended up purchasing, you can get that insight from, like you said, AMC and path to conversion. That would be your first step. Then the second step will be understanding your multi-touch attribution. So understanding if you're over or under invested with that particular strategy, if you're talking about an awareness play. And so if you're able to break this up, now we're looking at an impression-based attribution for that upper funnel tactic, and then we're looking at maybe a click-based engagement for the lower funnel tactic. Now you can get the full picture of whether or not you need to invest or pull back from that media strategy.
Wonderful. Yeah, some of the questions, as you've mentioned, the AMC, there's like a handful of them. The first one that I have here is a little more technical, so DL, I might pass it to you, and then we can open the floor. How do you test multiple AMC audiences for the same campaign or targeting strategy? Do you duplicate the campaigns or test them one by one? Do you have any best practices around that?
Yeah, you know what? I may have to alley-oop this one to Braga over here, but no. Really, when you're talking about, for example, programmatic in DSP, you have your particular order. So if you're looking at Amazon on operated, if you're looking at 3P inventory, you have different audiences for those particular line items that could be beneficial for you to test. So the line item is a place where you can look at some different audiences within that particular campaign, which has a strategy towards it. And Braga, I'm going to let you know for you, so you can get more insight there as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I would agree with that. It's really going to come down to breaking those audiences out of the line item. If you have 10 different audiences in one line item, you're not going to be able to see kind of the performance across the board. But again, if you're running a true A/B test across these different audiences, it's key. You're targeting the same inventory, your frequency paths across the board, are kind of set. You want to make sure you're actually doing a controlled test. You don't want to run 3P inventory versus Amazon inventory on the same audience because you're going to see different results. So really making sure you're kind of controlling everything you control and really isolating the changes down at the audience level to see, which of those AMC audiences is going to perform the best.
And what Braga is mentioning, just one before we move on, is that he's talking about some of your order and line item structure or your setup, right? So you have your Amazon on the operated, you have your 3P inventory, you have on and off Amazon, and then you have your devices, mobile web, desktop, mobile app, for example. So these are things that you need to kind of look at and evaluate as you understand, so help you understand if that audience you're targeting is efficient or is relevant to that particular strategy.